Welcome to The Changeover, the podcast that gives sales and marketing teams at industrial organizations the fuel to grow and prosper in today's dynamic landscape. We're Wider Group, an integrated marketing and sales growth agency and one of the first 20 HubSpot partners in the world. We're glad you tuned in. Let's roll.
Hi, I'm Greg Linnemanstons, president of Wider Group. In this episode, we're exploring the role of AI in content creation with Phillip, our director of creative strategy. You'll hear how AI is transforming content workflows for industrial marketers, from ideation to distribution, and learn strategies for integrating AI tools while maintaining the crucial human element in your content. Let's dive in. Joining me today is Phillip, director of creative strategy at Wider Group. Joe's been with us about 4 years, engaged in content creation and working on content strategy with our clients. But for almost the last 2 years, she's been deep into figuring out how to integrate AI into our content development and content management and editorial planning, all that stuff. So, Joe, I want to flip it over to you and ask you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what got you here in the position you are in today that makes you so good at what you do.
Well,
How's
good
that?
at what I do. Okay. I got my start writing about 20 years ago, give or take. And that was in actually compliance and technical writing. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. And I moved from there into marketing and have since written really for just about everything from, product packaging to in-app copy. So pretty much you name it. And yeah, I've been at Wider Group for about 4.5 years, and it's the best place I've worked so far. I can say that for sure.
Good. Anybody who's watched any of our other episodes know we love to talk about the then and now. And in this case, the then is November 29th, 2022, because the next day, ChatGPT was released to the public. Tell us about the early days for you, the early days of AI 2 years ago.
Right. So when it landed, right, when ChatGPT launched, the first reaction that people had was, oh my goodness, what is this? AI is coming for our jobs. And at the same time, I think on the other end of things, a lot of people looked at AI and said, this is a miracle, this is magical. And so they developed some really unrealistic expectations for what they could expect from outputs from the very beginning as well. People got into this idea that rather than becoming a writer, you should become a prompt engineer. Do you remember that? That was like a job description for about a week.
I remember somebody announcing that they were really upset about this because their son they were at Purdue in engineering school, and they said, now there's going to be people who learn how to use AI and call themselves engineers, and my son's degree isn't worth anything, which was one of the stupider reactions that we probably heard. There's a lot of ways to react to AI. That's not one of them.
Right. And actually, one thing that's really funny about this is, generative AI really only became available to us about 2 years ago. And in that time, AI itself has advanced so much that specialized user requirement of knowing how to engineer a prompt, that's going away because AI is learning how to teach its users how to prompt. So it's getting easier and easier for people to use.
Yeah. So you mentioned the reaction that's coming from my job. It's changing everybody's job. There's been a lot written, and I know you have your favorite writers, a lot written about the role that AI can play as a collaborator. We've talked about AI as your smartest friend that you bring to your job with you.
Invite it to everything.
Yeah, talk
That's
about
right.
that.
So in April of this year, I think it was, Ethan Mollick, professor at the Wharton School, published Co-Intelligence. That's the name of the book. And it is a fantastic read. It's a quick read. It's a really, really great starting place for people who don't really understand generative AI, who really need, I guess, a clear understanding or a clear mindset of how to get started using the tool as a collaborative sort of intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So not to do the work for you, but to be a really helpful assistant to you in getting your work done.
Yeah, I can remember reading that book, and that was one of the first times I started feeling comfortable about AI and the role it was going to take with us. I can remember I heard Paul Raitzer giving a talk about AI for marketing probably 7 years ago at Inbound, and I got terrified. And I started thinking, thank God I'm as old as I am, because I'm not going to be affected as much as the 30-year-olds will. Now, that book, Co-Intelligence, really helped me change to think about, oh yeah, this is a collaborator that if I'm one of the people using these tools to my benefit, I'm going to be ahead of the people who aren't using it, and it's my opportunity to be the best me. Is the way I started thinking.
Right.
When you think about all the tools that are out there, and my mind is blown by how many different platforms and apps and toolboxes. I mean, it's staggering. Tell us about the stuff that you're using today and your favorites.
Sure. I think I tell everybody, and I'm sure I've told you plenty of times, that there is never a day that I'm at work that I don't have a few tabs open to a couple of different LLMs. I always have ChatGPT open. It's always an open tab on my laptop. I also use Claude. The two are similar, but they're different. And
how is Claude different?
So the language models themselves are different.
Okay.
And capabilities are different too. Claude, for example, can't browse the internet like ChatGPT can.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
ChatGPT is learning every day, and Claude doesn't have the access to learning that ChatGPT does.
The Claude interface doesn't have the access to browse the internet in real time with you while you're using it.
So I can't ask Claude about what happened today in politics.
Today, probably not.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas you could direct ChatGPT to go to a site that you prefer and summarize the page, for example.
Oh, so you can direct it to go places.
And then
on the
tell you
internet.
what it finds.
Okay.
That's right.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. So I've got those two open. I keep Perplexity open as well because it's great as a research tool. And both ChatGPT and Perplexity, when they serve up answers to you, if you have questions, they also serve up links to the sources, which is helpful.
What makes Perplexity better for some things? You said research.
Mm-hmm.
What makes Perplexity better? What does it do?
That is a really good question. A major difference is that it is really geared toward research.
Okay.
So in addition to serving up the answers to the research questions you ask, it will, for example, automatically give you follow-up questions. So it can help direct your research and help streamline your thinking.
It'll ask you, were you interested in this, or would you like me to explore this?
It'll actually list some follow-up questions for you that you can just click that follow-up question if you wish.
Wow.
And it'll provide you with additional research.
Yeah.
So it can speed up that process for you quite a bit.
And do you use, is it a paid version?
Now I'm outing myself as not a paid user.
Okay.
But yeah, I
And
don't
so the
use
free
the paid
version is pretty good.
The free version is pretty good.
Okay.
I haven't played in the paid version.
Yeah.
And inevitably there are more features, there are more capabilities in the paid versions than you have in, of course, the free ones.
What about when you think about tools that you use expressly for content creation?
Yeah.
What are some of the better ones that, if you were recommending to your peers, what are the handful of products that you would absolutely recommend to anybody?
Well, one thing that I would, I guess, caution everybody about right now is to be a little bit agnostic about their tools. Because first of all, we know AI is being embedded in just about every
Everything.
other tool we have.
Yeah.
So we're going to be seeing it more and more. We're going to be getting little prompts from AI in a lot of the other applications that we already use. But we use SparkToro, which is AI driven. And we use that for audience research. We use SEMrush, which of course also uses AI to help us with our SEO research. We use Fireflies, which does note-taking and provides us with transcriptions, which I'm finding really important.
Does that feed Notebook LLM?
Notebook LM?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Notebook LM.
So we can take transcripts from Fireflies and drop them into Notebook LM.
Okay.
And then Notebook LM, another tool, which is a Google product, we can use that then to ask questions to the transcripts and get answers served up from Notebook LM. So that's another tool we use. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thinking about your everyday use, what are the kinds of things that you're doing today and every day where AI is now a disciplined part of your approach?
I would, again, say almost everything, right? So we're doing a lot more content that revolves around subject matter experts and interviews with subject matter experts. And that's for a number of reasons. We know that there is an increasing demand for perspective-driven content.
Yeah.
And for
the perspective of the subject matter expert.
Of an expert.
Of a human expert.
A human expert.
Yeah.
Yes. And interviewing those experts allows us to get access to information that might not be as readily available on the internet or generally.
Right, because it's in their heads.
It's in their heads or it's in their experience. And so that's where, you could use ChatGPT, for example, to write a whole blog post, right? I could probably ask it, write me a post of, 1,200 words about something specific and technical. And it 100% will spit out something. It may or may not be correct because, again, it's a large language model. It is constructing sentences. But if I use an SME interview and a transcript of that interview as the fodder, right? If I upload that transcript and work with that as my raw material for my content, then I know, first of all, it came from that one human SME. And I know that that human SME is also going to review that content later to make sure it's truly correct before it gets published.
So the process is you're taking the transcript or the recording from an SME interview, and you're uploading it to Jasper or to Claude or
ChatGPT.
Or ChatGPT, sure. And you're asking it to create, to turn that into an article focused on this or that. I mean, you decide,
right, exactly.
You give it the direction.
Exactly. I can give it the very specific direction. I can give it the information about the target audience. I can give it the information about the way that the target audience feels.
Yeah.
And so I can shape that output before the output happens so that I have less shaping to do after the output happens.
Because I heard you and Kelly talking earlier today about the biggest, what you saw as the biggest downside of AI created content is that it doesn't have a human voice.
Right.
And so how do you turn an output that started with the SME, you gave it to the AI optimizes it into for readability, clarity, organization.
Sure.
But then you've got to go back in there and put the human voice in there. What's that like?
Often, yes. And that can actually be pretty time consuming. There are a lot of AI products that say they can get your voice exactly right, and we know that.
Even mine? Come on.
It's tough. It is really tough.
That's curious.
You can always feed the AI tool examples and say, copy this voice. And there are numerous tools that are specifically for that purpose, right? And they can lead you through what you need to tell it so that it can better copy.
Does video help that? I mean, if you took a recording of a talk somebody was giving and gave that, uploaded that to ChatGPT or Claude, would that be a better assist at it understanding how an SME communicates? How they present ideas? And
it's interesting because people think they sound a certain way, but then they sound a different way.
Yeah.
So it might sound like them, and you still might get the feedback, this doesn't sound like me. Right.
Yeah.
So that's, human.
Hey, I got news, Jack. That's what you sound like.
Right. Yeah.
That's funny.
But with samples and feeding the AI, the information it should try to mimic, that is a helpful way to get through that.
Yeah. So when you're talking to a client, how do you set expectations about how we're going to use AI, or is that not even a part of the conversation with them? Is it necessary from your perspective? Is it necessary to pull the curtain back, or as a marketer of integrity, you're not misrepresenting our work by using the tools.
Right.
What's the line? I'm curious.
That's an interesting question too, because when we started with this, we didn't really know what it could do. We had to play with it first, right? We had to start noodling around in these systems to find out what they could do and what we should do with them.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it makes sense to let everybody know that yes, we do use AI, but at the same time, if I explained how I use AI, I ask it a bunch of follow-up questions, or I will copy and paste a paragraph in there and ask it to help me make it more readable. Some of those little steps, does it really inform your client about the mechanics? That to me feels like I'm explaining how I write as well.
Yeah. That's like having to tell them 15 years ago, yes, I keep a thesaurus on my desk.
Right.
Right. And I go to this thesaurus pretty often. I'm not going to tell you how many times.
Right.
I'll let you assume that I don't need it all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because really, we want to focus on the output. We want to make sure that the output is original. We want to make sure it's correct. We want to make sure that it resonates with the target audience and it's helpful. Right, that we're delivering helpful content. And that's why starting with a subject matter expert is so often the key to that, because a lot of times these are the engineers behind the solutions. So we know they've been dealing with customer problems and issues and solving for them. So when we can tap right into that source and then use the AI tool to get it into as much content as possible, we're really helping to get that message to the right people.
You mentioned writing to the audience. And earlier you said something about SparkToro and how you use them for audience research.
Yeah.
How are you using SparkToro in this case? How are you using them to understand the audience better and understand what it is they want, what their needs are, what their questions are, what's the pain?
And that's exactly what we do. We might start with visitors to a certain website, or we might start with a certain keyword search that we know these people do. And from there, we dig in and we find insights. So we can find out where else they go. We can find out what their favorite social media platforms are. We can find out which influencers they follow. So we start to get a feel for the things that appeal to them. We can also look up other things they're searching for. So we can start to get an idea of what's really on their mind.
Now, that to me sounds more like capabilities that we had before AI, because that's more about data collection, I think.
It is.
What about the predictive capabilities of AI? Can it look at what an audience or what people of a certain title and a certain role are interested in and predict where they go next, what their behaviors are telling us about what they need or what they want?
Well, it can tell us what they're searching for. And sometimes it's really interesting. If you look at, say, top searches for somebody in this role, if everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but if a large number of people with a certain title are searching for something very specific, that's going to give us clues. Even if it's something that maybe there's an industry event or something like that that is more important than we realized, right? We can find some of that out by digging around in the audience research.
I was having some fun today, and I was on ChatGPT looking for quotes, comments from some leading thinkers on the impact of AI for industrial marketing. And one of the themes that kept coming up was personalization at scale. So tell me about how do you achieve
personalization at scale
in content? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we think about personalization at scale, I think the best place for us to talk about that is probably when we're talking about a CRM, right?
Okay.
And in this case, of course, we like to talk about HubSpot because reasons.
Yeah.
And HubSpot rolled out Breeze AI.
I heard that.
With a bunch of tools.
Yeah.
That's right. And one of the capabilities that we are getting ready to start helping our clients enhance is exactly that, personalization at scale. And in this case, what the AI is capable of doing, and again, this is embedded right into the CRM. It's part of the tool. What it can help marketers do is take the information, the data that exists based on existing behavior, right? Already logged behavior of those contacts, and use that information to make sure if it's, for example, serving up assets, marketing assets, it's going to serve up very specific assets that align with the behaviors that have already been logged in the CRM based on the behaviors of that contact.
Yeah.
So what that means is where you used to get an email that maybe had your name and your company, or maybe it was segmented by industry, it can literally be, one-to-one.
It's literally personalized based on you.
For you.
Based on your behaviors. So how do you use AI and the tools that we've been talking about to do a better interview? Because you mentioned that our process is we interview a lot of SMEs. So how does it help you do your job better there?
We used to have to do a lot of manual research to prep for interviews because I don't know if you know this about me. I am not an engineer, turns out. But I have to talk to a lot of them. Thanks. I think thanks. So it would take hours, right? I mean, if I'm going to talk to somebody about their job and it requires an understanding of
technology,
principles of physics, right? So many things. I'm going to need prep time for that. And I can get closer to finding out what questions really matter by having a conversation with an LLM first, right? So I can start by asking the LLM the very basics, the fundamentals of the technologies we're talking about.
So explain the technology at a 9th grade level.
Yes, exactly that. So that I can come into that conversation with a little bit better understanding. But it also helps me ask better questions, because if I understand the basics, I don't have to waste time in the interview for that. Subject matter experts have very limited time. They're busy people. And if I can get quicker to the real meat of that conversation, I'm saving them time, I'm saving myself time.
And ChatGPT, if you prompt it properly and give it the framework of who the SME is, and then ask, what are the top 5 things they're worried about in 2024, based on advancements in technology or the economy or environmental, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
And it'll give you, they care about these 5 things most.
It'll at least give me a good inkling and a good direction to go in. Absolutely.
When you think about what professional content managers, those people who want to be good, really good, and I'm remembering Paul Reitzer's quote, AI won't replace marketers. The marketers who use AI will replace those who don't. What if you want to be one of those that are doing the replacing? So what's your to-do? What's the directive that you give people?
Start experimenting now. Don't wait.
Because it doesn't cost
$20.
Because it doesn't cost. Well, you can do it for free.
You can do it for free, but if you want a better model, spend the $20. Spend $20. Get into whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or some other tool. I would recommend starting with one of those basic tools before jumping into something more specialized.
And basic, when you say basic, you mean it's very generalized. It can do a lot.
It is a total generalist, but it needs very specific prompting to get there, right? A lot of the more bespoke tools, if you think about Jasper or Writer, some of those, they have an interface that's built for the writer.
Okay.
Right. So it's already sort of been primed and prompted to make that process easier.
So you don't have to, for ChatGPT, you have to say, I'm a writer and I'm considering this subject. Jasper knows you're a writer because you're on Jasper.
I wouldn't even tell it that. I tell the AI who it is. Right. And usually I tell the AI that it is the persona of the SME that I'm working with.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll direct it toward a subject area, right? And sort of orient your compass for that conversation. Yeah.
So you start with experimenting. What's after that? What do you do next?
Well, you need to experiment. You also need to make sure you have your people experimenting, because I think you will recall as well from Malik's book, the best person to figure out how to put AI to work is the person doing the work. Right?
Yeah,
so getting more people to be using it.
So C-suite people shouldn't send their people off to do it. They should be doing some of it themselves so that they can have a conversation with their people about, hey, did you try this?
Yes.
I tried this and this is what I learned. And
well, you're trying it.
yeah.
I'm relying on it.
I'm relying on it every time I have a question that I need to get my arms around fast. What about protecting yourselves? Where does oversight come in? Because we've all heard stories about the video that went out with 7-fingered models and body parts that should be connected but aren't. What do you do as a marketer to protect yourself against stuff that's going to be embarrassing?
Well, 2 words, right? QC.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Right. There are a few
Those
risks.
are letters, not words.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Quality control. There are risks of using a tool, right? There are risks of associated with using AI. People don't say hallucination anymore. You don't hear it very much, do you?
No.
But it's still real.
Yeah.
AI hallucinates. It makes stuff up. It just wants to make you happy. So it might tell you what it thinks, in quotation marks, you want to hear, and that may not be something true. It just might be a string of words that, seems to satisfy
let me
you.
ask you, does that mean that you should watch about leading the witness, about not giving whichever platform you're using without giving it an indicator of the answer that you're trying to find?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's worth experimenting to find out.
Yeah. Because personally, I haven't seen hallucinations, but I'm usually asking really open-ended questions that I'm trying not to lead it to an answer. But I have heard people talk about, and especially I think it's things like people doing legal research and they're trying to get some sort of case example, and they're leading the witness. And there have been instances where I heard of one guy who got in real deep, I was going to say deep, it was hot water. and it was because he was looking for a precedent.
Citing cases that didn't exist.
And so he filed a brief that had imaginary cases, and it got thrown out, and he got in trouble because it was bad work.
Fake.
It was fake. It was bad work.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is a real risk, and that's why when it comes to the output, you always have to have it reviewed. You always have to have it reviewed by someone who is accountable for the veracity of the information.
I've heard about people using multiple AIs connected to do quality control. Does that work?
That would depend on the input. It's what you get out, what you put in.
In my mind, I'm wondering if you prompt the second or the third in the chain to please find errors in this, please identify or please fact check these key principles that we've got in this case study or in this white paper we're preparing. That you encourage it, you're encouraging it, almost rewarding it, because
for finding errors?
To find errors.
Yes. And I think you can incentivize it that way to find problems, to find errors.
Of course, it wants to get paid in Bitcoin, right?
Well, I have read studies where you can offer it $50
Really?
That you don't have to pay it, and
really?
it might do better work. There were early
Imagine
studies.
I was paying you $50 per error.
Right.
Find me some errors.
Correct.
That's funny.
Correct. So that is something you can do.
So what about legal or ethical questions? And in some cases they're the same, but not always. What do you offer as advice there?
I think we need to always look at the output and take accountability for it as if a human, i.e. the human holding the computer, wrote it. So if I make something, if I create content using AI, I need to be able to stand behind that content.
Yeah.
And I am a human. And that means that I really do need to read it. I need to believe it myself. And if I can't stand behind it, if I can't stand behind the facts and the information that I have in that content and the way that I arrived at it, then that's up to me. That's my ethical position.
What about the other side of it, which is the stuff that AI is presenting to you when you ask it a question? That was presumably, it was educated by somebody else who wrote or spoke on the subject. And so that could have been their intellectual property that AI is giving to you, and you're then selling it to somebody else. So what about...
That again, a good point. You always need to check for plagiarism, right?
Yeah. How do you do that?
Well, I actually have a process that involves writing line by line. Okay. So I do write content pretty close to line by line, no matter whether it came out of an AI tool or not. But even so, if there are facts, if there's information that comes up, I never believe a statistic without looking it up. I never believe anything
so go
associated.
Back to the source.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Never believe anything associated with any kind of number without verifying that information.
Yeah.
Yes. And then again, we always have subject matter experts review that content. They tend to be really well versed in their fields and very aware of IP considerations. But we always have to keep that at the forefront.
Yeah. What would you tell people, or maybe just comment on what you do to stay current? Because things are changing so fast. We're drinking from the fire hose. So how do you keep current with advancements, cautions, the dynamics of what's happening right now?
So I do subscribe to a number of newsletters that come in. I do pay close attention to some of my favorites on LinkedIn, and I'm always in the tools. So when there are updates, I find out about them. When there are new capabilities, that becomes apparent. If you're in those tools every day, you're going to notice the improvements. From week to week, you'll notice performance improvements in the tools, in the outputs. But in addition to that, it's almost impossible to stay away from the information once you plug in, right?
If you were going to name drop, in the interests of attracting one of these thought leaders that you follow to this podcast, who are the people? Name some names.
Follow Rand Fishkin and love his whiteboards and the information and insights. It's what I love about what he does is it's always applicable.
Yeah.
There's always a direct application you can walk away with. Yeah. Also, Andy Crestodina does really helpful stuff.
Andy, if you're listening, you're on our short
Come
list.
on over.
love to have you on the podcast soon. You mentioned Ethan Malik, of course.
Absolutely.
He's a New York Times bestseller.
Yep. For good reason.
Paul Reitzer.
Yes. Also, Mike Kaput there too. Yeah.
Mike Kaput. Yeah. Also of Cleveland, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I would say beyond that, I am really, really wary because it's a world of snake oil too.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of people saying it can do everything for you and you don't need to hire people to think anymore. That's a step too far. Yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you for this conversation. This has been absolutely a thrill. It's I've learned some things. I hope we can do this again really soon, because it feels like we got a lot more to talk about.
And if we don't, it's going to change in a couple of weeks. We'll have something to talk about.
There you go.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Joe.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, that's all for this episode of The Changeover, the podcast for industrial marketing and sales teams. Join us next time to learn how our client, ESOP Partners, shifted from a focus on traffic to lead generation, what they changed, and how it worked for them.
Thanks for joining us on the Changeover podcast. Remember to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Whiter.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know what you'd like to hear about next time by messaging Whiter Group on social media. Thanks for watching.